the presenter role.
Yeah, I know. Don't worry. Okay, thank you.
All right, great. So welcome. So our final talk of the workshop will be by Desmedt, who's a faculty at the University of Texas at Dallas. And he'll be telling us about the impact of outdated crypto books on research and Anonymity Revisited.
Okay, I'm from the youngest university, so I feel very young today. So, University of Texas, Dallas is a little bit more than 50 years old. So, I'm going to talk about the impact of outdated crypto on research. And as you see on the program, there's actually no date. There's no, it basically says to be decided. No title, no title. The date was decided, but no title. And so that allows me to talk about something that is the most up-to-date possible, because I didn't have to announce it months in advance. And so I was thinking about the title, and I attended a talk 2 weeks ago by Claudia Diaz, which is about a topic outside ours, and completely inside. How is it possible that we have this contradiction where it's completely outside and completely inside? The outside is done by an outside community. The inside part is that it is actually doing applied crypto. Okay? And so the talk was given 2 weeks ago as an invited talk by Claudia Diaz. And she explained how her group and other groups, in particular, for example, in the users community, are building alternatives to Tor. Tor is an anonymizer using MIX and networks and using direct cryptographer networks. Okay. So there's a problem with that. Is that it is old-fashioned crypto. And what is old-fashioned crypto? So for those of you who are not familiar with mixed servers, you're going to have messages coming from sender 1, sender 2, sender 3, sender 4. And then they're going to be permuted and they're going to be basically republished. And in the direct cryptographers, you're going to have a bunch of people that in that virtual one. It was 3 people who having a dinner. Then the question was, did NSA pay for the dinner? And so they're going to have a message, and that message then is going to be broadcast to all the receivers. Okay? So what I'm going to do is say, hey, is these well-accepted approaches, are they actually the best? And this is actually work from that was published a few years ago. And that's why I'm going to go back to Claudia Diaz. I'm very worried that she was not aware of this publication, on which I'm going to reflect back later. I'm very worried that what we are doing is we are teaching our students old material without updating it. And if we are doing that, then we should also look what other communities are doing, and what impact do we have if we are writing books that are outdated, and then these are used by other communities as a privacy community. So what's the most fundamental problem is that we are looking as cryptographers. And I was actually giving this talk at Royal Holloway, and Fred Piper was in the audience, and he said to me, you know, all this mixing that you are all doing, how come that when you have all this anonymity, that criminals are being caught? How come that spies are caught? And so, by reflecting afterwards, and this example is actually not in the text that appeared, it's very, 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 very clear, did I say very enough? That the worst strategy you can do is broadcast if you want to remain anonymous. So what Sean does in certain circumstances is the worst possible. And let me give you a very concrete example. So some of you have a degree in math, and so Ted Kaczynski, his official name was Theodore, had his PhD in 1967. At 25, he was the youngest assistant professor of math in the Eastern University of California, Berkeley. He resigned in 69. From 1975, he wanted to bring down the industrial technological system. In 1979, he sent bombs, and the FBI could not find him. Okay? Between 85 and 87, he started a second series of bombs. 1995, again started sending bombs. And then, what happened, I remember having received a message saying, do not open packages that actually you don't know from who they came because they may be a bomb. In particular, it was targeting computer science departments. Okay? So in 1995, Ted Kaczynski said that if a major newspaper published his manifesto, he would stop. So he published in the New York Times, it's the same as broadcast. So all these years, from 1978 to 1995, that Ted Kaczynski was living an anonymous life. Okay? The moment it came in the New York Times, he got caught. Why? Because the content of the message uniquely identified him. Okay? So the broadcast which David Chaum said you should do if you want anonymity, that actually guaranteed that Ted Kaczynski got caught. His writing style was recognized by his brother and possibly a high school teacher. So we had several discussions because we were actually also looking at an FBI agent, Hudson, which emerged as an example. And there the question was, how did the FBI catch him? Because again, it was based on the content. They were looking at who inside the agency might have that information. That was for one leak. They had a set of possible people who inside the FBI or another agency might have had that information. And then there was a second leak, and they took the intersection. They only had 3 people in an intersection. And so, again, the content of the message. So if you would broadcast it, it would be of no help, because that content is very unique. Okay? So it's kind of taking a popular book. Let's say in this case, Matt Rosen and broadcast Rosen. Yeah. That's if we have 20 students in a room and one of them is going to broadcast that. That could be anybody. Clear? But if you have some unique information where only 10 people might not know that information, and that information pops up, that content is going to reveal who you might be. Clear? Broadcasting is only going to make it worse, as we saw in the case of Ted Kaczynski. Okay. So, to obtain anonymity, we may have receivers who are not intended receivers who might receive a copy of the message. That's one impact. It should be context dependent. And so, what we actually were able to do is to make examples in which we have the 3 people. So, anonymity. So, the main problem that happens when you look back at David Chaum is that if you look today at the papers that talk about anonymity, they say the goal is broadcast. No. Broadcast is a method. It is not a security model. So saying you have to permute all the messages if you do mix, and then you have anonymity, it's an approach. It's not a model. And so what we need to do is look at what are we using if we define the one-time path. If we don't define the one-time path, or we define the perfect secrecy in the secret sharing scheme, we talk about independence. The share should be independent of the secret. In the case of ciphertext, the ciphertext should be independent of the plain text. So here, what we want is that the view, so who the sender is for a particular message, that should be independent of the view of the protocol, that the parties have that independence from the world. It's the same as saying the conditional probability that you have here, the sender being a particular sender given the view, is the same as so the a posteriori is the same as the a priori. Exactly the same as has been used for secret shares, exactly the same as has been used for perfect secrecy by external. That should be the model. Correct? And when you do that, the whole thing changes. So here is an example in which one of these three parties might be the adversary, either R1, R2, or R3, or R3. This message is sent in probability a third. That message is sent in probability a third, and this message is sent in probability a third. When I explained that to Claudia Diaz at Cannes, I told her, take the example that this is the butcher, this is the baker, this is a computer scientist. And the message being Intel, bread, and meat. Clear? So you start to see, I see some people smiling. From the message, you know from who they came. Clear? It's kind of unique. It's again the content that's going to leak who was the person who sent that message. And then we were able to show that if you want to achieve this definition, which basically we call perfect anonymity, that it's impossible to achieve that in the case of when you have this scenario. Now, Claudia's reaction, she didn't react too much when I explained that to her after her talk, but there was another person standing beside, and he said, you know, you only have 3 people, you need more. I didn't react to that. That's why I was talking about it. I'm talking about it today. Because in the case of Ted Kaczynski, you have roughly 300 million people in the United States. Clear? So, if you have something very unique and you broadcast that, and when you have 300 million people, the broadcast will kill you. I mean, arrest you. Yeah? And now that solution, also here, broadcast will be the worst one. And achieving perfect anonymity is impossible. So then, we actually concocted this crazy example here, in which one message will be sent either by S1 or S2. The probability one or the other is sending total is 1. The probability S1 will send to R1 a message M1 is 1/8, M2, which are different, is 1/8. The message M1, which is the same as that one, being sent to R2 is happens to be probability 1/4. The message 2 being sent by S1 to R2 is an 8, and here the same message M1 being sent by S2 to R2 is an 8, and the same for S2 being sent to R2 is a 1/4. If you add all this up, it goes to 1. In that case, we can prove first that if you use Sean-Danny Grover scheme, it's going to fail to achieve perfect anonymity. However, there exists a partial broadcast version that guarantees perfect set anonymity. And what you have to do there is with a certain probability. So, if S2 intends to send a message to R2, then if it's M1, the probability 3/5 she has to send it also to R1, and the probability 2/5 she also has to send it. Oh no, so okay, with 3/5 she has to send it to R1, and in this case with 3/5 also she has to send this message to R1. So sometimes she has to send. And so, basically, in this case, if S1 sends a message to R2, then S1 does not have to send it to R1. So it's a very complex setting. And in that case, if you use the alternative to David Shum protocol, we can show that we can achieve the perfect anonymity. Okay? So it's a partial broadcast, but it's not that I'm going to send always to you. It's kind of with a certain probability you will get it, with certain probability it's not. And then using entropy arguments, we can prove that we can achieve, for that particular case, anonymity. Okay, so where are we with this now? It's basically the only thing that we have done is open the door. And say, hey, we need to be very careful what Sean has been doing. There's no model that Sean put there. And the reason why there is no model is that was common in the 1980s and 1990s. It was very common for people not to make models. what we have done there is just open the door and say, hey, we need to think what perfect anonymity is, and we propose the model. But then, we only looked at two probability distributions for Danny cryptographers and analyze those. But what is it in general? When can we achieve perfect anonymity, and when can we show that it will not work? I mean, not certain approach, but some other approach. Or no approach at all, as our first one, where we had the butcher, the baker, the computer scientist. What's the impact on electronic voting? A lot of these protocols actually do electronic voting using these approaches from broadcasting. So I said we only have to analyze two. What if we try to go further? It looks very complex, so we have no clue. Can we meaningfully relax the definitions? We tried to do that, but it didn't make much sense, so we stopped that. What's the impact of our work for digital forensics? The guys in digital forensics, they want to do the opposite. They want to arrest people. Okay? So does this approach help them formalize what they want to do? I think. So we have the same results for mixed case, but what happened is that we had a very hard time having this paper published. And why was it so hard for us to get this paper published? Because all the referees are thinking this way. The old way that people were thinking for decades. And now we walk that way, which is very hard for people to turn around. And so we kicked out the mixed case for the paper, shortened it, and then with many revisions, finally got it accepted. So it did get finally published in the Article Transactional Information Theory, the same journal as the Diffie-Hellman's paper was published. Okay? So how many of you here read that journal? Very few, I presume. You read good Europe. Oh, there's one person in the back saying yes. Okay. So for that Kaczynski, the reference is Wikipedia, but I think the big question is, we need to reflect on how we do our research. So today there are so many venues that results published on one venue may not be known by research publishing in another venue. I'm talking here about 2019. Claudia Diaz had never heard about it. And when I told her to her, she dismissed it. Yes, this is to be dismissed, this work. Despite the clear example of Ted Kaczynski, who was running loose until he actually broadcasted his message. If we see, this is just not just for crypto, but in other areas of science too. People copy a book, so when you're going to write a book as an author, you say, okay, what other chapters can I take from here and there? And then copy that. And that means that when you copy chapters from your book, you may just copy the chapters on anonymity. Even though it's a new book, it might still have the old data there. And then finally, are there other cryptographic topics from the 1980s and 1990s that were never properly modeled? I'm sure we have a model in other areas of crypto. And how are we going to tell people who apply crypto, even if the cryptographers don't know about this? How are we going to tell others outside our field, hey, be careful. You should read the literature. And if you see, so in the 1980s, everybody was interested to go to crypto, but now you have crypto, you have Europe crypto, you have Asian crypto, you have privacy community that have their own conferences. Then you have the computer security community that has their own conferences. 50% of the papers are crypto, etc., etc. Clear? So I think it's quite a problem. So those are the things I wanted you to reflect on. Thanks for your attention.
Great. Thank you, Ivo, for the talk. Are there any questions? Yeah.
You give the example of Ted Kaczynski and Robert Hansen. Would you consider Satoshi Nakamoto as potentially a counterexample of somebody whose message is definitely going to limit the number of people who could have sent that message, because who would have had the knowledge and education to come up with Bitcoin in the first place, and yet he still has remained anonymous.
So, is it a counterexample? So I think that if you look at the style, if you read a scientific paper, there is a certain style that we do. And when we have students, the first thing we tell our students is where are you going to submit the paper? Oh, I'm going to send it to crypto. Okay. Read a few crypto papers and then try to copy their style. First introduction, then etc. Clear? So when you send the paper to CCS, then you have to follow another approach if you want your paper to be accepted. So in that sense, we limit the way that these papers are being written. And so people have been fishing around for the Nakamoto paper, who it might be or might not be. So it limits indeed who it is, but you should not also forget that there have been speculations that the whole thing might have been designed by NSA, okay? Where we do not know who is working inside NSA on these things. I'm not going to go too much about speculations, for what reasons that NSA might or might not have designed that. So, there might be people who recognize the style. I mean, if you, it's supposed to be designed by NSA. Okay? And now you're one of the persons who read that paper, and you recognize the style of writing of foreign people. You say, oh yeah, I know this person. But you're not allowed to leak it anyway, clear? So, yes, in a sense, it's a counterexample, but the question is, how can we model all these things and then say, in the case of Ted Kaczynski, do not leak your message, do not make this manifesto. In the case of Bitcoin, you can. Clear? We want to find models for that and then see what we can do and cannot do. So that's why the case that I had with the butcher. So that's, unfortunately, if you want to model big things where you have 200 or 300 million people or more, in the case of, because it might be somebody from outside the United States if you look at Bitcoin. That's why when we model these things, we look at 3 senders. And then obviously we open ourselves up for the criticism. But then the math becomes much easier and you can clearly show what you want. So yes, a very good question. For which I don't have the answer, as you see. Okay?
Great. Other questions?